Buddham Sharanam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Sangham Saranam Gacchami. I go for refuge in the Buddha. I go for refuge in the Dharma. I go for refuge in the Sangha. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. Sangham Saranam Gacchami. So, we will begin with our customary 15 minutes of meditation. I have a question for you. Does the Buddha really liberate sentient beings? Huang Bo said no. What say you? Chant the Gatha on opening the sutras. This Dharma, incomparably profound and minutely subtle, is rarely encountered, even in hundreds of thousands of millions of ages. Now we see it, hear it, hold, and maintain it. May we completely realize the true mind of all Buddhas. Okay, get comfy, relax. Mute your mic for one minute there, Minwei, please. There. For some reason, uh, audio comes back from you. I'm not quite sure why, but it does. Anyway, giving us the Dharma talk for this evening, coming from the land of the future. Words, words, no yesterday, no today, no tomorrow. Venerable Minwei.
Okay, hopefully you're not getting any feedback now, at least if you're muted too. Good. Yeah, so I'm going to riff a little bit on Unsan again. A few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, he gave a Dharma talk, and it was more inspiration for me. So I'm going to delve a little more deeply into something he did. But first, I want to ask you, just thinking out loud, and I ask you guys to bear with me today because this is going to be a little fun. All right, I'm going to share a PowerPoint slide with you. It will probably not make the YouTube highlights list, okay? But I'm going somewhere with this. So I want you to think. When you think of Christopher Welkin, the actor, what do you think of? Anybody?
The ultimate maybe dude.
I have no idea who that is.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what I think of when I think of Christopher Welkin. More Cowbell. It's a Saturday Night Live skit from years ago. And he did several, actually, riffing on More Cowbell. Because, you know, there can always be more cowbell. So I may title my Dharma talk today, More Cowbell. But it's going to go like this, folks. I'm going to give you 3 words, and I want you to think of 100 different ways you can say whatever those 3 words are. And I don't want you to say them out loud. Just think to yourself. Scripture, mind, heart. Now you could put those three words. I guess the total number of combinations would be like 3 cubed or something, right? The total number of combinations you could put those in that. But what I want to talk about today, riffing on Unsan, is the Xing Xing Ming. Why the Xing Xing Ming? Well, I was reading some of the Xing Xing Ming the other day, and then I thought to myself, I wonder what that other guy had to translated the exact same thing. And then I got to another one. I said, well, I wonder what this guy translated the Xing Xing Ming to say. And I started coming across dozens. I don't mean 3 or 4. I mean literally dozens of translations of the Xing Xing Ming. And hopefully you guys can see my PowerPoint slide that just popped up here. Good. Kevin gave me a thumbs up, so I appreciate it. Now, if I can see it, then it'll be okay. All right, so the Xing Xing Ming is 3 characters there. And the first 2 are pronounced the same in English anyway. Xing, Xing, Ming. And boy, what a story of how many ways you can translate this. And I'm only going to spend like the first 3 or 4 minutes talking about the title itself. Because I picked one of my, not my favorite, but I picked one of my favorite stanzas out of the poem. And I started digging as to how many different, oh, let's see. Oh, I went too far. Let me go back. Sorry, folks. Oh, no, well, that's all right. I don't need to do that. So what's in the name of the Xing Xing Ming? Hopefully you guys can see this. And you see, this is just how they translate the title. If my PowerPoint slide will work with me. Inscribed on the believing mind. Song of the trusting mind. Verses on the faith mind. Inscription on faith in purity of mind. Poem on faith in mind. Sincerity mind inscription. Faith in mind. On trust in the heart. Inscribed on the believing mind. Inscription on the faith in mind. On faith in mind. There's more. Inscription on trust in the mind. Have faith in your mind. The mind of absolute trust. Gata of Xing Zan. Affirming faith in mind. Trusting in mind. Faith in mind. Have faith in your mind. A song of enlightenment. Trust in mind. Inscription on faith in mind. Verses on the faith mind. Confidence inscription. That's one of my favorites, and we'll get to why later. So this is just the title. Just the title. 3 Chinese characters, and I found in like 15 minutes on the internet 23 different ways that people have translated just these 3 little Chinese characters. It's ridiculous because, again, when I think of Christopher Welkin, I just think of more cowbell, plain and simple. There's not that many ways in English to say more cowbell. Now, granted, if I spoke enough German, then maybe I might have 3 or 4 ways of saying more cowbell, but probably not as many ways as I can find that they translate Xing Xing Ming. So this is supposed to be a picture of Xing Zan. Now the guy died in 606 of the Common Era, so I'm not sure anybody really knows what he looks like, but in a book of Chinese patriarchs, this was the rendition that they gave for good old Xing Zan. But I decided I wanted to look at, like I said, one of my favorite verses. And so let's see if I can get my screen to go to it. Here we go. So I'm going to ask you, just think into your head a little bit, and I'll probably hit one of your favorite translators here in a moment. But do you have a favorite translator? In general, when I read things that have been translated from Chinese, old Chinese, mostly Zen or Taoist stories, I like David Hinton, and I have reasons why I like David Hinton. He doesn't necessarily have the most flowing text. He doesn't necessarily have the most accepted text, but at least when he's translating, he tells me why he translates something the way he did. And he usually gets into the etymology of the word, of the Chinese pictograph. And so I like that. I find it helpful that I'm like, oh, well, that's what that part of that character means, and that's what the other one looks like. So, okay, I get it. I see why he translated it that way. Sometimes we get translators though, and they don't even tell us what they're translating. They just give you the translation and you just, oh, okay. It reads pretty well. I like that. I can't compare it to the original. I can't look and see what word they're using for which character, but it's okay. I kind of like it. So again, I don't know if any of you have a favorite translator of the Xing Ming. Maybe it's Waller. Maybe it is Richard Clark, Shen Yang. I don't know. Let me see if I switch pages here. Maybe you have D.T. Suzuki. This is an old book of his. He wrote this book back in the 40s, I think, the Manual of Zen Buddhism. But here's how he translated these 4 lines. So this is the 4th through the 7th line that I've decided I wanted to translate. Not translate personally, but look at, because the 4th through the 7th, each line in the Xing Ming is only 4 characters. So this poem is 146 lines long of 4 characters for each line. Usually when it's written down, it has 4 characters and 4 characters to make 1 verse. Okay, so it's like 8 characters and then 8 characters. You get 2 total verses out of it, but it's just a total of 4 total lines from his poem. So out of, I don't know, you do the math, 146 lines, 4 characters each. That's like 584, I think, if my math is right. 584 characters, of which many of them are repeated. So there's not even that many different characters. But so I wanted to look at this one because this is one of my favorites. And this is how D.T. Suzuki translated it. And he gives you the text. So you see how he takes 4 characters and turns them in on the first line. He turns it into 7 English words. If you want to see it manifest. And then he takes 4 characters and he turns that into take no thought either for or against it. That's only 4 Chinese characters, remember. And now he does even better. 4 more Chinese characters. To set up what you like against what you dislike. And then he gets a little more concise, the last 4 characters. This is the disease of the mind. 4 characters in Chinese turned into, wow, 7 characters on the second line, 8, 9, 10. Is that 10 on the third line? All just from 4 characters. It reminds me of a little exercise we were doing. Breyer sent out, I don't know, a month or 2 ago about a poem by a Japanese Zen master / sword instructor, who now is the name of a radish. But he gave a 8 character writing to a guy, and we were all trying to translate it. What could these 8 characters possibly be? None of us could come up with just 8 characters, hardly. It was impossible. And that's what we face with the Xing Ming. But it gets pretty good, folks. Some of these are great, and some of these are like totally off the wall. So we move on from D.T. Suzuki, and I go to Richard Clark. Richard Clark is probably, I don't know, if you have the Xing Ming at home, you might have a copy of this one. Either this one or Waller are probably 2 of the most famous copies. So the book you see there was translated by Richard Clark. And you see, he's a little more concise in his translations. And this one and the next one of Richard Clark. I'll just go ahead and skip to that one there. So Richard Clark has given 2 different translations of the same verses, of the same 8 characters. I mean, in this regard, it'd be, 16 characters total. And so you see, we can go and do it line by line very easily here. If you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinion for or against. The struggle of likes and dislikes is the disease of the mind. That's pretty concise. much more concise than D.T. Suzuki gave us. But you see, when he was translating that, he had a Chinese editor with him who helped him. When he was translating it on his own, without the Chinese editor, and this is what's in my book, that white book you see on the right side here. If you wish to know the truth, then hold to no opinions for or against anything. To set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind. So the same guy gave us two different translations of the same 16 characters. How do you know which translation is right? How do you decide which one you can like, which one you can read and trust? The odd thing is, Zen monks in China memorize these 584 characters. This is it's a very common thing, even better than memorizing our limericks that we might print in our Bodhi Day Slam. They memorize 584 characters, and they don't have 79 translations of it, but we do in English. And it makes it very difficult sometimes to decide which one do we really like. So here's Waller. Maybe you own this book. Maybe you own this version of the Xing Xing Ming. And so Waller says, if you want to experience the truth, then hold no judgments for or against anything. Attraction and aversion are afflictions of the mind. And then Thomas Cleary translates it this way, and you're like, what is this guy coming up with? If you want it to be manifest, don't maintain accord or opposition. If you don't know the mystic essence, you toil in vain. You toil in vain at meditating on quiet. What? So I got a Thomas Cleary book. I have several Thomas Cleary books. And I always thought, oh, wow, he writes so well in English. No, actually, this English right here from this translation is almost unintelligible. And if he thinks he's translating it from Chinese, it's not even in the same ballpark of what some of these other translators are writing. So I scratch my head and I'm like, if the only exposure I had to the Xing Xing Ming was Thomas Cleary, I wouldn't have a single idea what he was even talking about. Don't maintain accord or opposition. All right, I can probably figure this out. But if you don't know the mystic essence, come on. All right, so let's move on. Hinton. So I told you David Hinton's one of my favorite because he walks you through and tells you why he uses the etymology of the words to talk about it. But even this one, you can understand, but it's not very poetic sounding, right? So David Hinton, right? To face Tao's shimmering way, simply give up like and dislike. For battling, does that say battling? My screen is really small. I'm on my laptop. For battling things you dislike is mind's great disease. So we see a common thread here. Don't like or dislike. When you do, it's mind's great disease, right? So we get this thread of neither attachment nor aversion. We get this equanimity thread, non-duality thread that goes through all the translations except for maybe Cleary, which is clearly not Cleary. But looking at the text, they get different ideas of what the words mean. And so you see Hinton there is clearly talking about the to face Tao's shimmering way. Nobody else threw anything about Tao or the shimmering way in there. So we get all kinds of different translations. I'm not going to go through all 100 of them, but here's another few that you see on here. Some of them are quite, I I don't know, I'd say famous translations. Whaley here's a famous translation. It's been around since the 50s. And you can see, if you want the truth to stand clear before you, never be for or against. The struggle between for and against is mind's worst disease. Nobody else said worst. Where did he get worst? Right? I don't even think anybody else said clear before you. So you get the concept, you get what they're trying to do. And I know a translator, they're trying to not just give you a rote translation word by word by word. They're trying to, make it into intelligible English language that flows like a poem, like Sing San actually wrote. He wrote this as a poem. And it's not one of these 13 syllable poems with only 2 vowels that Robert promises us he's going to give us from the Polish tradition. But it is 4 characters, which in Chinese, each character only has 1 sound, 1 syllable, right? So xing, xing, ming being 3 characters, 3 syllables, right? So you can see out of 584 characters, there's only 584 syllables in the whole poem. And yet we get things that in some regards are just not even intelligible. If you want to get hold of what it looks like, do not be anti or pro anything. The conflict of longing and loathing, this is the disease of the mind. That's the first time we've seen anything about longing and loathing, right? Let me just throw a couple of more on here. Watson. Watson's another famous translator. You may have seen some of his stuff. So this book, Entering the Stream, Watson was a contributor to that. So we'll just look at his. If you want the way right here before you, have nothing to do with assent or dissent, where acceptance and rejection vie for mastery, this is sickness to the mind. So this guy is famous for his translations. And how different is that from Richard Clark or D.T. Suzuki, Waller, David Hinton? They're all so different. So how do you choose? I mean, unless you read Chinese, and I don't, how do you choose? So Xi Shenglong wrote, if you want mind to manifest itself, be neither for nor against a thing, for this is contention, a disease that affects the mind. Something to think about. I'll let you take a look at these. I'm not going to read them all to you. But you see how different so many of these translators can get. One of them on here is He Qing. He styles himself as a Zen master. And so you find his book and he calls himself Zen Master He Qing. The Shuyun Order, the Portland Zen, they all have their little manuscripts or texts that they chant from. You get different ideas. And even more. And none of them are the same. None of them are the same. How about Osho here? Osho, admittedly, do you guys know who Osho is? He's like this half Zen, half Hindu guy. Many people say he runs a cult. He says he's God. He's an interesting character. But anyway, he says, if you wish to see the truth, then hold no opinion for or against. The struggle of the struggle of what one likes and what one dislikes is the disease of the mind. And he admitted he took Richard Clark's translation and kind of made it his own. So I appreciate that. He at least was honest about it. I adapted Richard Clark's translation. I don't know that Osho speaks any Chinese, though, or reads any Chinese. So how hard is it to take somebody else's translation and then make up your own words for it? I don't know, but that seems to be what happens a lot with the Xing Xing Ming. Now, in a second, I'm going to ask you if you have a favorite of your own, and I hope you will respond. But here's, if I can get my screen to advance. Here. Okay. So here are the 16 characters again. And I love this translation, not because it's a good translation, because it teaches you what not to do. If you want to gain something, don't be obedient. Disobedience and fighting are caused by heart disease. Google Translate. So probably when you are attempting to translate scripture, poems, sutras from a Chinese writer, Google Translate's probably not going to be the one to help you out. But we had lots of choices there, all of them telling us what the whole Xing Xing Ming says. What does Xing Xing Ming? The last two lines of it, no matter what translation you read, basically says faith in mind is non-dualism. Non-dualism is faith in mind. Non-dualism is the Xing Xing Ming. The Xing Xing Ming is non-dualism. That's the whole poem. All right. He translates. I mean, Sing Sun puts that very clearly on the very last stanza of his poem. And yet, trying to milk out of, I took 23 there, 23 different translations, and try to milk out of it what Sing Sun was trying to say seems impossible at times. How do you do it? Anybody? I'll mute my mic if we get it feedback, but how do you pick a favorite translator? Because I think all of us have one. I told you guys earlier, David Hinton is mine, not because he had the most beautiful translation of the Xing Xing Ming, but I appreciate when he says, you see this character here? That's the symbol they use for Tao, and that's in the lower bottom corner of this pictograph or this character they use. And so when he says things like that and it points out to me, then I like that, you know? So what we call faith in mind inscription, whatever, he called it sincerity mind inscription. And he tells you why he uses the word sincerity as instead of faith. Anybody have a favorite? Waller, Clark. There, Unsan has a favorite.
Of course. Richard Clark is my go-to. To me, it makes sense. The way he puts things, the way it flows, gets the point across. He doesn't stray into weirdness. You know, there's no wisdom of the Tao manifesting through the shimmer of essence and, you know, all that. And believe me, I went through this exercise. I even tried comparing them, like I was trying to get columns on a page to line up, and it was impossible. It was among the more ridiculous things I've ever attempted. But Musang did the same thing. I don't know if you've seen that book, but he has all the translations in the back of it. It's like his bit is like this, the translations at the end are like that, and it's great. And that's it. Thank you.
Just to throw in that there's a Monkey Mind article by James Ford where he doesn't line them up one by one, but if you want to look at a bunch of translations, he has 20 English translations linked in a row. So you can just click on them and they open in a new page. I'm going to take that link and just throw it in the chat if anybody wants to browse around at a few different translations. From my quick survey, I mean, I think I like the Richard Clark too, but basically there are a few translations, unlike Cleary, who was clearly on LSD or out of his mind at the time. who, they translate it pretty straightforward. If you want to see the great way, don't hold on to your opinions. Like and dislike, will cause conflict, and you don't want to do that. So if it's something along those lines, it seems like it's pretty accurate, right? The other ones that go haywire don't seem to be as useful.
I agree, Robert.
Mark, I've done a similar exercise with a number of different things. Some of my favorites, and I think it depends what I'm doing with them, if that makes sense. There are some that I prefer for, and here we're picking and choosing, so sorry. There are some I prefer for trying to teach or explain concepts. There are others that flow better if you're chanting, and so it tends to be what's the effort. But yeah, it's a fascinating exercise. And as you mentioned, that's how I got curious about that poem. I'm always looking at all these things and saying, well, how the hell did you get that? And I do the same thing with native languages, what people translate, and it's funny.
Minwei, I can't help but see the irony in what you just read and talking about the likes and the dislikes of the different interpretations. And to me, lining all these things up is fruitless because it's like going to a shoe store and trying on a few pairs of shoes. And suddenly you're comfortable with one pair and you're like, okay, this is the one I'll take. Each one of those things that you read basically said the same exact thing. Some were esoteric. I don't know about LSD. But some went out of their way to be extraordinarily grounded. What pair of shoes fits well for you may not fit well for Xiaomin. Yet the message behind it is the most important thing. The way that we conduct ourselves according to that message is the most important thing. The vehicle is like going back to the finger pointing at the moon, right? In a way, I mean, we all get hung up on the finger. Not that I want you to give me the finger, but I'll just take your word for it. And nor am I trying to, say that you may not have a point when it comes to, well, if the translation is completely off or it's leading you astray from what the original meaning was, you could take maybe some offense to that, or you might want to be wary of it or be guarded for your students or things like that. But to try on 15 different green shirts from 15 different manufacturers and finally finding the one that works for you, it's okay, right? The whole message behind what you were talking about was don't make likes and dislikes. And yet here we are talking about the likes and dislikes interpretation. Thank you for your teaching.
Hey, Kevin, I like that a lot. And I think there's a good point that you're raising there about making likes and dislikes of translations. Except what got me on this time was I was reading a commentary on the Xing Xing Ming. And so 500 years after Tsingzan had died, the first commentary was written on Faith, Mind, Inscription, whatever name you want to give it, by Chan Master Qing Liao. And I was reading his commentary, which had been translated by Thomas Cleary. And at the beginning of the commentary, Thomas Cleary had translated the Xing Xing Ming. And I was like, I'm familiar with Richard Clark's version of the Xing Xing Ming. That's the version that I had learned from the beginning. I mean, that's probably the first version of it I had ever read. And now I'm trying to figure out, well, what does the commentary mean if I can't even understand what the translator means? So I don't disagree with you. It's, to me, it's the message, and like I said, I chose the message like and dislike, and I need to end this. I'm sorry. I chose the message like and dislike because that's the message that you're conveying, and that's the message I like from the whole thing. But when I spend my money to buy a book, I want to trust that what they're telling me is what was written, and that's why, as a consumer, I want to know what I'm getting is actually teaching me what was intended to be taught. And I think we all come to conclusions on how we feel about what we're being taught from ancient worthies. The truth is, none of them are going to enlighten us. You're only going to enlighten yourself. But if you read something that might, yeah, the finger. Missing the moon. You're right. So anyway, it's time for me to quit. But I just, again, this was meant to be somewhat tongue in cheek. This was meant to be fun for you guys to see. Don't go to Google. Google will just give you heart disease. Find a good translator you like and see if you can appreciate the words that are written.
Thank you for your teaching. And remember, the opening is a great way is easy for those not attached to likes and dislikes. The word attached being crucial to the meaning of everything. So anyway, it's ironic that I prefaced your talk having no idea what it was going to be on by giving the ending of Richard Clark's translations, words, no today, no tomorrow. Serendipity. So anyway, someone asked Huang Bo, what is the way and how must we follow it? And Huang Bo responded with, what sort of thing do you suppose the way to be that you should want to follow it? Let's chant us some Heart Sutra, version that Robert likes. Oh, he's gone. Oh well. Mahaprajna para mita Hridaya Sutra Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, when practicing deeply the Prajnaparamita, perceives that all five skandhas are empty and is saved from all suffering and distress. Shariputra, form does not differ from emptiness. Emptiness does not differ from form. That which is form is emptiness. That which is emptiness, form. The same is true of feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness. Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They do not appear or disappear, are not tainted or pure, do not increase or decrease. Therefore in emptiness, no form, no feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of eyes, and so forth, until no realm of mind consciousness, no ignorance, and also no extinction of it, and so forth, until no old age and death, and also no extinction of it, no suffering, no origination, no stopping, no path, no cognition, also no attainment, with nothing to attain. The Bodhisattva depends on Prajnaparamita, and the mind is no hindrance. Without any hindrance, no fears exist. Far apart from every perverted view, one dwells in nirvana. In the three worlds, all Buddhas depend on Prajnaparamita and attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore know that Prajnaparamita is the great transcendent mantra, is the great bright mantra, is the utmost mantra, is the supreme mantra, which is able to relieve all suffering and is true, not false. So proclaim the Prajnaparamita mantra. Proclaim the mantra which says Gate Gate Para Gate Parasam Gate Bodhisvaha Gate Gate Para Gate Parasam Gate Bodhisvaha Gate Gate Para Gate Parasam Gate Bodhisvaha. Let us do some dedications of merit. I've got a couple of people, then I'll open up for the rest of you. All sentient beings are one seamless body and pass quickly from birth to death. We remember those who cared for us and are gone, those who are ill, those who are at war, who are hungry, and who are in pain. May they heal and have peace. We especially dedicate our service to Brad Hunter, Mike Gingy Wood, Venerable Cholson's father-in-law, Caleb, John Chan. Anyone care to add someone in?
Haley Lynch. Lonnie Tropu.
Any others?
Joanne Sheridan, Bailey Sheridan, and all those being affected by the wars globally.
Any others?
One for the prisoners, one for Palestine, and another for some folks that went to Kent who were holding a picket line for their rights.
Anyone else? All beings in the 10 directions, subject to the greed, hatred, and delusions of themselves and others. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, Mahaprajna Paramita. We'll recite our faith and practice vow. I will never retreat and will be firm in my mind in this correct Dharma. I will escape from the samsaric cycle of birth and death and definitely will see my original face. I will be sure to inherit the life of insight of the Buddha and save all sentient beings. Infinite realms of light and dark convey the Buddha mind. Birds and trees and stars and we ourselves come forth in perfect harmony. We practice and recite this for all beings, in grateful thanks to our many guides along the way. Let's recite the 4 great Bodhisattva vows. Sentient beings are numberless. We vow to help them all. Delusions are countless. We vow to see through them all. Opportunities to awaken are infinite. We vow to embrace them all. The Buddha way is endless. We vow to embody it. Life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes swiftly by and opportunities to awaken are easily lost. Strive to realize your true nature and do not squander your time by night or day.